Carter's faith was a major part of his life. His personal pastor, Tony Lowden, would visit him every week at his home and says the president would always ask him 4 questions. Pastor Tony Lowden is with me now. So, Pastor, what are those 4 questions President Carter would ask you?
Edward, thank you for having me here today. Those 4 questions that he would always ask me, no matter where or how long I've been gone, the moment I sit down with him and Miss Rosalind on the sofa would be, where have you been? What have you done? Who have you helped? And how can I help you help them? And it was him looking at ways of being able to serve. Sometimes he would ask me for the phone numbers of members of the church who had been sick or shut in. And him and Miss Rosalind would pick up the phone and call them and tell them how much he's praying for them. You don't see that in a lot of leaders that we have around the nation.
You don't. And is this why the former President Carter's legacy will be remembered almost more for what he did after being president because of what was in his heart?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, he was a officer in the Navy, and one of the biggest things, you know, not to self but to country was one of the mottos that they have in the Navy. And he's always been that way. I believe, without a doubt, that his whole heart was to serve no matter what. You oftentimes, when we see servant leaders who are elected to serve, whether it's on a local level, state level, or on the federal level, once they're no longer in office, they stop serving and it becomes about them, finding other ways to take care of themselves and be on the front. But President Carter, his whole thing was always about still serving. I mean, how do you go from getting kicked out of the White House, public housing, and then start building housing for people around the world? It's all because he still wanted to serve.
What do you think the former president's message would be to Americans today?
I think his message today would be that we have to make sure that we hold on to our faith. We hold on to our hope. And let those 2 things be the guardrail for our government, the guardrail for our laws, knowing that we can still have our Constitution, we can still have our laws, but we got to have grace and redemption and forgiveness. We got to look at ways of doing things for those, the least of those, helping people who are struggling. We got to understand that in the rural communities, in the inner city communities, they too sing America. We got to look at ways of being able to bring everybody to the table and find ways that we're not fighting in political arenas, but we're working together to have cooperation and compassion and concern about our fellow man, as well as around the world.
Do you believe it was that faith that provided that glue for him to be so grounded?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when he put his left hand on the Bible and then raised his right hand to make a covenant with his God, that he would serve our great nation. He did the same thing when he was a state senator in Georgia. He did the same thing when he was a governor, and he did the same thing when he was sworn in as an officer in the Navy. Once he took his left hand off, that meant something to him. He did not stop serving. And just because the nation in the second term did not give him a second term, he did not stop serving. He kept serving, and it was all about his heart. I remember when he fell, and one Sunday he was supposed to come in, teach Sunday school, and then go to Tennessee to build houses. But he fell, and Secret Service rushed him to the hospital there in Plains in Americas. And they asked me to go into the room and tell him he shouldn't go to Tennessee to build housing. Let the people that's already going to be there do it. And President Carter looked at me and he said, "Listen, Tony, hospitals are just like prisons. They're easy to get into, but they're hard to get out. All I need you to do is help me get out of here so I can go and build homes in Tennessee for folks." He got out of the hospital. He had a bandage on his eye. He put a cap on. He had a black eye. The very next day, he was taken off on a plane to go build houses for rural communities and people in Tennessee.
Pastor Lowden, you're going to carry his message on. I know it. I appreciate it. Thank you, and Happy New Year to you, sir.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.